There's a reason this video feels dangerous. Not because it's clickbait, but because it isn't. You clicked on this because you feel something is off, and you're right. What if I told you the truth about women and human nature has been deliberately kept from you? What if the version of reality you were given was designed to keep you chasing approval, while someone else holds the power? Arthur Schopenhauer wasn't afraid to say the quiet part out loud, and what he said still echoes today. He saw the games, the patterns, and the illusions, and he called them out for what they were. Brutal, uncomfortable, but strangely honest. Now before you assume this is just another women-bashing video, pause. This isn't about hate. It's about truth. And truth doesn't care about feelings. It's a mirror. And most people are terrified to look into it. Schopenhauer's essay on women was banned, criticized, and buried. Why? Because he challenged the comforting fairy tales society loves. He saw desire as a weapon. He saw manipulation not as rare, but as built into the dynamics. And he refused to pretend otherwise. He believed that if men understood the actual forces at play, they would stop living reactively, they would reclaim their dignity, they would stop being pawns, and start living with purpose, on their terms. So here's the question, why don't women want you to see this? Because once you understand how these dynamics work, you stop being easy to control, you stop chasing, you stop simping, and you start choosing. You stop getting lost in signals that were never sincere. You see through the games. You stay calm when others get played. You operate from strength, not scarcity. You become a man who can't be manipulated. And to some, that's terrifying. This video is not going to give you sugar-coated lies, but it will give you power. The power of seeing clearly. And once you see clearly, you can never go back. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just understand Schopenhauer. You'll understand the game itself. And more importantly, how to win it. Welcome to the Irresistible Effect, where we don't run from the truth, we face it head-on. Now let's get into it. Before we dive into his controversial views, you need to understand the man behind them. Arthur Schopenhauer was a 19th-century German philosopher, often labeled as the philosopher of pessimism. But that label doesn't do him justice. He wasn't negative. He was clear-eyed. While other thinkers romanticized human nature, Schopenhauer stripped it down to its core: desire, illusion, suffering, and will. He believed that human behavior is not guided by reason, but by blind, irrational impulses, what he called the will to life. And nowhere, he argued, is that more evident than in sexual attraction. That's where his view on women becomes central. Schopenhauer saw desire as a trap, something that hijacks your rationality and enslaves your attention. He wrote about how men are biologically wired to pursue women, not because of logic or love, but because of nature's deeper agenda, reproduction and survival of the species. He wasn't trying to flatter anyone, he wasn't selling hope. He was revealing mechanisms, dark, primal, uncomfortable mechanisms, that drive us whether we like it or not. But he also saw how these forces are exploited, especially by those who understand the emotional hunger of men. According to him, men are often blinded by idealism, while women tend to operate more strategically, not always maliciously, but instinctively. And that difference, he believed, was society's biggest open secret. He didn't just offend people, he terrified them, because his work forced readers to question the stories they built their lives around: romance, fairness, equality, unconditional love. Schopenhauer didn't say these were impossible, he said they were rare, and often illusions used to maintain control. He also predicted something we see all the time today: the way men are trained to pedestalize women and suppress their instincts, while women are encouraged to prioritize status, security, and advantage. He called out the imbalance a century before modern dating apps, before social media, before hookup culture, and yet, it's like he saw it all coming. To understand his philosophy is to begin seeing through the surface. You begin to notice the patterns. You start asking questions you were never allowed to ask. You begin to wake up, you begin to think clearly. And once you see through it, you can't unsee it. Schopenhauer wasn't trying to be liked, he was trying to be honest. That honesty is uncomfortable but necessary. It cuts through the noise. And it's exactly why we're still talking about him today. Now let's talk about why this video even exists, because of one essay Schopenhauer wrote that shocked everyone: on women. This wasn't a blog post. This was a full-blown intellectual grenade. In it, Schopenhauer wrote that women are not equal counterparts to men in reason or character, but more like children, guided more by instinct and emotion than logic or depth, and he didn't say it to provoke. He said it because he believed it was observably true. He argued that women's primary evolutionary role was not to create, build, or rationalize, but to reproduce and nurture. From that lens, their strengths are in seduction, preservation, and manipulation of attention. And yes, he used the word manipulation. He said women naturally prioritize power by proxy, meaning they don't go head-to-head in direct battles for status or dominance like men do. Instead, they use attraction, suggestion, and emotional leverage. Not because they're evil, but because nature made them that way. It's strategy born out of necessity and survival instincts honed over millennia. These were not polite claims. Schopenhauer's critics called him bitter, hateful, resentful, but that criticism missed the point. He wasn't writing from heartbreak, he was writing from pattern recognition. He looked at the dynamics of courtship, family, divorce, and social customs, and saw a system that rewards illusion over clarity. He pointed out how men fall for appearances, how the idea of feminine innocence, virtue, and loyalty is more myth than reality, and how, throughout history, civilizations have built elaborate rules and religions around controlling male desire, because that desire, if unchecked, can make men weak, distracted, and easy to control. This is why Schopenhauer believed women prefer men who are unaware. The less you understand how the game works, the more likely you are to overinvest. The more you believe in the fantasy, the less you protect your energy. And in his view, most men were raised to serve the fantasy. It's not accidental, it's engineered. He even went so far as to say that romantic love is a biological trap, engineered not for your happiness, but for nature's agenda. In other words, the soulmate idea isn't real. It's a trick to get you to commit your resources and time in service of reproduction. Harsh? Maybe. But that was Schopenhauer's point. Let's take a moment and really sit with this. If you've ever felt confused in relationships, blindsided, or taken advantage of, despite doing everything right, this is the lens that explains it. You weren't weak. You were uninformed. And let's be real, whether or not you agree with him, you've probably seen some of this play out. A guy who gives too much and gets ghosted. A man who builds everything for a woman only to be discarded. Or someone who sacrifices his purpose to keep a relationship alive, and loses both in the end. Schopenhauer didn't say women are bad, he said they are what they are. The problem, he believed, is that men have been taught to see them as something else. Something more idealized, more innocent, more pure. And when that illusion breaks, it breaks the man with it. The real danger isn't women, it's ignorance. It's thinking you're playing chess when you're really just a pawn. And that's why this essay hit so hard and still does today. It doesn't just criticize women, it challenges men to wake up. It asks you, are you seeing reality, or are you trapped in someone else's illusion? If you felt this shift already, drop your experience in the comments. Let's talk. That's what the Irresistible Effect is here for. Conversations that wake you up. Let's fast forward to today. Modern society, dating apps, social media, and the explosion of hookup culture. You might think Schopenhauer's views are outdated, that they belong to another time. But once you start looking through his lens, you'll see just how eerily accurate he was. Take the concept of hypergamy, the idea that women are instinctively wired to seek out the highest status mate available. Today, we see this everywhere. Apps like Tinder and Instagram create a global stage for attention, validation, and access. Suddenly, the top 10% of men are visible to everyone, and average guys are invisible to most. And what happens? Women gravitate toward that small elite. And the rest of the men? They're left confused, chasing, wondering what went wrong. This isn't bitterness, it's observable data. It's pattern. It's human nature meeting exponential technology. What was once subtle is now amplified to extremes. Schopenhauer warned about this long before algorithms and swipes. He described women as selectors, not because they're cruel, but because nature designed them to be highly choosy. When you add technology to that primal instinct, you get the chaos we see now. A system flooded with options but starving for meaning. Validation has become currency. Likes, DMs, emojis, they're not just digital symbols, they're emotional control mechanisms. A woman can command more male attention from her phone than a queen could summon in an empire. And what does that do? It warps dynamics. It's no longer about connection, it's about power. The ability to attract, discard, test, tease, all from a screen. And many men walk right into the trap. They start measuring their worth by responses instead of results, by attention instead of achievement. This is what Schopenhauer predicted. that the surface of relationships would become more beautiful, while the substance would rot. That idealism would blind men, while realism would be shamed, and that truth would be buried under comfort. You can see it in the rising confusion around gender roles, declining marriage rates, and growing frustration on both sides. Schopenhauer wasn't giving us a solution. He was giving us a mirror, a brutally clear reflection of what happens when nature meets illusion. Men today are waking up. They're realizing they've been sold a dream that doesn't serve them. That putting a woman on a pedestal often means kneeling for approval instead of standing for purpose. That's why his ideas matter now more than ever. Because men need to recalibrate. They need to step back and ask, what am I doing this for? Who am I trying to impress? What do I actually want? And what do I lose when I ignore the reality right in front of me? If you've gotten this far in the video, take a second and drop a comment. Not just an emoji, your real thoughts. What part of this hit hardest? Because at the Irresistible Effect, we're building something bigger than content. We're building awareness, we're building strength, we're building clarity. And when awareness becomes your lens, everything changes, your relationships, your mindset, your life. That's how you take the power back. So what do you actually do with all of this? Schopenhauer showed you the mirror, but staring at it isn't enough. You've got to use it. You've got to let it reshape how you move. First, detach from the fantasy. That doesn't mean hate women, it means stop expecting them to fulfill a role that was sold to you by movies, songs, and social programming. Love is not guaranteed, loyalty isn't automatic, and attraction isn't unconditional. When you accept that, you stop being surprised. You start being strategic. Understanding female nature isn't about control, it's about clarity. And clarity gives you power. The kind of power that doesn't react, it selects. It doesn't chase, it evaluates. When you know that attention is leveraged, you stop giving it away freely. You stop simping. You stop bending your standards just to get a shot. Because now, you understand that your energy is your value. And your value needs to be protected, ruthlessly. You also stop taking rejection personally. You realize it's not always about your worth. It's about her algorithm, her emotions, her options. So instead of trying harder to be liked, you become harder to impress. Instead of adjusting your identity, you fortify your core. This is the shift from being chosen to doing the choosing. And here's what most people won't tell you. This shift is not about game or tactics. It's about identity. Who are you without her attention? Without the external validation? Who are you when the phones are off, and it's just you and your path? Because if you don't know the answer to that, you'll always be chasing. You'll always be waiting for permission to feel worthy. And that's a prison no man belongs in. That's why philosophy like Schopenhauer's matters. It forces you to step back from the noise and face yourself, not the image, not the avatar, the man. You stop asking, how can I get her to like me, and start asking, do I even like the life I'm living right now? That's where the real growth starts. That's where freedom begins. You stop being reactive. You start becoming intentional. You train, you build, you focus. And when you do, your energy becomes magnetic, not because you're chasing attention, but because you're mastering presence. You become the gravity others feel. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing them, they start noticing you. Not the mask, not the try-hard version of you, but the grounded, disciplined, aware version, the man with direction. So yes, Schopenhauer was harsh, he was uncomfortable. But he was also right about one thing. Illusion is slavery, and truth, even when painful, is liberation. It breaks chains, especially the ones you didn't know you were wearing. When you start choosing yourself, you'll notice something strange. The same people who ignored you now want your time. The same energy that was taken for granted suddenly gets respected. Because when you stop chasing, you glow differently. You walk differently. You decide differently. This isn't arrogance, it's awareness. And awareness is the beginning of all strength. Strength that doesn't scream. It radiates, it speaks in silence. That's the message of the Irresistible Effect. This isn't just content, it's a call to recalibrate your mindset, your mission, and your masculinity. You're not here to chase, you're here to choose, you're here to build, you're here to become. And if this video spoke to you, don't just keep scrolling, subscribe, join the movement. This is your reminder, you don't need to chase what's already yours when you've built the gravity to pull it in. Let's wrap this up by coming back to the question that started it all. Why don't women want you to find this video? The answer isn't about blame, it's about power. Knowledge is power. Awareness is leverage. And the more you see clearly, the less you're controlled by illusions. That's the real threat, not to women, but to the system that thrives on your confusion. We live in a culture that constantly tells men to do more, give more, prove more. And yet, the more you give without understanding, the more you lose. You lose your time, your peace, your direction, and eventually, your sense of self. Schopenhauer wasn't trying to make you bitter, he was trying to make you bold. He wanted you to see beneath the surface, to stop playing roles handed to you by a society that benefits from your blindness. Because once you unplug from the fantasy, you reclaim your reality. You begin to understand that being a man isn't about being needed, it's about being complete, not dependent on validation, but grounded in vision. Not reactive to rejection, but centered in purpose. And here's the kicker. Once you stop chasing illusions, you don't become cold. You become clear. And with that clarity, you attract differently, you move differently, you live on your terms. You no longer fear being alone because solitude becomes strategy. You stop trying to convince people of your worth and start showing it in how you live. Quiet confidence replaces noisy desperation, purpose replaces confusion, mission replaces reaction. You start asking different questions. Not how do I win her over, but am I even living a life that reflects my values, my goals, and my greatness? That shift changes everything. That's what the irresistible effect is all about. It's not about being liked, it's about being aligned, with truth, with strength, with purpose. We're here to cut through the noise, to question the narrative, and to build a generation of men who move with depth, not desperation. So if this hit you, if something in your gut is telling you, I needed this, don't let it fade. Lean into it, go deeper, reflect, question, rebuild, comment below. Not just to share, but to connect. This channel isn't just a voice, it's a community, one built on the courage to face what's uncomfortable, to rise above the noise, to evolve from the inside out. There's more content coming, but more importantly, there's a conversation that needs to keep growing. And you're a part of it now. You're not just a viewer, you're a thinker, a challenger, a builder. If you found value in this, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to wake up. And most of all, subscribe, not for the algorithm, but for the man you're becoming. Because once you see clearly, you can never go back. And honestly, you won't want to. This is the irresistible effect, and we're just getting started.